And I would just like to introduce myself. So, as Kim already said, my name is Klaudia, and I'm here with my husband Richard and with my two children, Adam and Hannah. And I also have another baby at home who is 20 months old, like a little toddler, not a baby anymore, but a little boy. And me and Richard live in Corby with our family. But I'm originally from Slovakia, as you can probably tell. I don't have a Corby accent. But
that's a good thing.
I just want to tell you a little bit about my background and how I became a Christian, how I got to know Jesus. So, when I was a child, I was raised in a Catholic home, and my parents were believers. And as long as I remember, I always loved Jesus, but I didn't really know what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus. And I liked to go to church, but then as the time went on, and when I was older, probably about 17, I just decided just to do my own thing and just live my own life. Not that I went off the rails like majorly, but I just had this idea in my head that I'll just do my own thing and see how it goes. And it didn't go really well, and I just probably 3 years on after that, I just felt like God was calling me back to Him, and He was telling me to come home, and I didn't really know what to do about it. And I just prayed to God, and I said, God, you know, if you want me to go back to be with your people and back to you, then you're going to have to show me a church to go to, or you're going to have to direct me, because I don't know. Although I lived in Corby, I didn't really know the area too well, and I didn't know where the churches were. And because I was raised in a Catholic home, I thought, oh, it must be a Catholic church that I need to go to. And I looked at different times, and I thought, oh, how am I going to go there? And didn't have a car, and had a little toddler, and I thought, this is not going to work out. So I just prayed a simple prayer like, God, you're going to have to direct me and show me where you want me to go. And then the next morning or the next day, this little brochure came through the door. It was like a local magazine, and there was an advert about a church that was meeting in a school which was literally walking distance from our home. And I thought, well, this must be the answer to my prayer. And I was a little bit confused because it wasn't a Catholic church, and I thought, why would God want me to go to a non-Catholic church? I'm a Catholic. But I just put that thought aside, and I just went along. And what I met was loads of lovely people like yourself, like really welcoming, and it was a really nice experience. And you could tell that these people really loved Jesus, and when they worshipped, you could see the joy they had, and they were really loving, like from the moment I walked in. And I just felt really comfortable, so I started to come. And then I met this lady, and later on she became like my spiritual mother, and she kind of like took me under her wings, and she wanted to disciple me. And then the first week of discipleship, there was these questions like, what does it mean to be saved, or how do you get saved? I didn't even understand the concept of it, like what it was. And then but then in that time, in that week, I gave my life to Jesus, and that was in 2010. And loads of things happened since then with our family, and Richard wasn't walking with God at that time, but he came to church later on. And then in April 2011, it was my baptism, and Richard came along just to like support me. I was nagging him to come, and then he came, and he just had this. He just came. He always says to save an argument. So he came, and God really touched him there. Same like what I explained happened to me. That he saw people worshiping God, and he just thought about the pastor. I want what he's got, and he was just there, like really captivated by the way I was talking. I had this glow around me. That's what Richard says anyway, and that's why when he like experienced the Holy Spirit, and then he said, oh, let's just come to church tomorrow, may as well make a weekend out of it. That's what he said. And then, so that was April 2011, and then in July he actually got baptized and gave his life to Jesus. Then in October we got married, and we went to Bible school since then. And it's just been an amazing journey with the Lord, and we're just really grateful for where He brought us from and where He brought us to, and it's just getting better and yeah, there's a lot more I could say about that, but I'll just leave it at that for now. So what I wanted to talk today about is to do a little bit about what you've been talking about sanctification, but I wanted to use this interesting illustration that God's downloaded to me probably a few months ago, and I've been thinking about it and been developing it, and I thought when I was praying about what I should preach here, and I kept changing my mind, and I thought, let's just bring this message to life, and I just hope that you receive it, and I hope you can take something out of it. So I've got some props with me. Can everyone see? So in my left hand, these are olives, and this is extra virgin olive oil, and this is a lot more expensive than this. So I bought this, was probably about 60 pence in Asda, and this is the extra virgin olive oil, and it was more expensive. I can't remember how much, but it's a lot more expensive than actual olives. And the reason this is more expensive is because these olives had to go through a process to become this. So when you're making an olive oil, there's a process that there is involved, especially the extra virgin olive oil. So the people who handle the olives, they pick them off the trees, and then they clean them, they wash them, they pick up the leaves and things like that, and any dirt and blemishes that are on them. And then after that, these olives go into this cold press, where they are pressed really hard and mashed until this olive oil comes out. And it's a long process, and it's also painful process for the olive, so to speak. Although it's not a living being as such, but it has to be crushed, and it has to die for this olive oil to come out. And that adjective, virgin, extra virgin olive oil, it means it's pure, and it's unspoiled, and it's fresh, and it's without blemish. So that's what it means. And I know you might be thinking, what is she talking about? What's this to do with God? But I'll get to that. So in the Bible, there's a lot of uses for olive oil, and oil is mentioned in the Bible about 200 times. I'm not exactly sure the exact number, but about that. And it was used in the Old Testament and in the New Testament for different purposes. So it was used to anoint kings and also priests. It was used to anoint the sick. It was also used as a preservative, and also burned to maintain a flame alight. And Jesus himself was referred to as the anointed one. And the place of the Garden of Gethsemane, that word Gethsemane actually means oil press, where Jesus experienced this pressing upon, where he couldn't actually go to Calvary without going through Gethsemane, where he experienced this hardship and pressing upon. And also in Arabic language, Christians in the olden times, they were referred to as the word masalan, which means anointed with olive oil. So, so as Jesus had to experience this excruciating pain of being pressed and ultimately die, we are also called to die to ourselves and to crucify our flesh. So just like these olives, when we get saved, we get picked by God, and then we get washed and we get clean. And then usually what happens is we go through some hardship, or God takes us through these valleys so our character can develop. But also there are ways for us to, if we want to become more holy, we do things that are not necessarily very comfortable, and they feel very crushing, and we feel like we're literally dying, but actually that means that God can live when we die to ourselves. Yeah, and I was just thinking about, so how do we do this? How do we get from being an olive to become a olive oil? And in Leviticus chapters 11 and 19, God gave special instructions to his nation, to his people. He called them, you are holy people. And he gave them special instructions so they would be set apart from the other nations, so they would be different. It's even now we are called to be different than the world. Like encounter other people, then they should think there's something about these people, these peculiar people. They are different, but what is it? Sometimes they can't put a finger on it, but we need to be different. We need to be. We have a high calling on our lives, so we need to be holy and we need to be different than the world. I just wanted to read just 3 verses from Leviticus chapter 19, verses 1 to 3, just to give you an idea of just some of the instructions that God gave to Israel, to his people. So verses 1 to 3, I'm going to read this from my New King James Bible. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to all the congregation, the children of Israel, and say to them, You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God." So that's just a couple of things there. So he says you need to revere to your mother and father. So the way we treat our parents and the older people says a lot about us, and we are to revere them. And you can see a lot of children these days, they don't have that much respect for the older people, but actually it's a biblical principle, and that's part of being holy, to respect others and to treat them with respect, especially when they are older. Even in Timothy, when we read that reading from Timothy, there are verses where it talks about Timothy. He was young and he was called by God to lead this church, but he had to respect the older people and he had to show reverence to them, and there are verses about that there as well. And also keep my Sabbath, so keep God's holy days, so even the days of rest, because we then enter into a cycle of blessing, and other days that he appointed to be holy, then we need to keep them like that as well. And how do we become holy? So by crucifying our flesh. And I just wanted to read a few verses from 1 Peter 1. 1 Peter chapter 1, 13 to 16. So it says, "Therefore gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and rest your hope fully upon the grace that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ, as obedient children, not conforming yourselves to the former lusts as in your ignorance, but as he who called you is holy, you are also be holy in your conduct, because it is written, Be holy, for I am holy." So Paul here is quoting 10 verses from Leviticus that I just read out. So this is quite practical, so what we can do, so we gird up the loins of your mind. So that means like you take every thought captive and you don't let your mind to get polluted by this world. And then not confronting yourself to your former lusts. So that's part of it as well. Yeah, so that's how you become holy, as he is holy. So we need to know ourselves, and we know what our tendencies and passions and weaknesses are, because we all have different upbringing and different family background or family trees, and there are certain things that sometimes go through generations, and sometimes like alcoholism in some families, or some people tend to be anxious, so sometimes we have to pray specifically into these areas, and sometimes we have to put things in place so we don't come under that curse or that spirit of whatever is coming. And another practical way of becoming more holy and not conforming to our flesh and to our lust is by focusing on Jesus, on prayer and Bible reading and fasting as well. And I want to talk a little bit about the subject of prayer and fasting, because it's not really talked about that much, or I haven't really had loads of teachings about this, but actually I've been looking into this a little bit, and we sometimes don't even realize how much power is in that. So the actual word fasting actually means abstaining from food. Some people might say you can abstain from other things, but actually it specifically means that you're abstaining from food. It's the 4th greatest need of a human body. So the first is air, I think. The second is sleep. Then the third one is water, and the fourth one is food. So when we abstaining from food, we're really crucifying our flesh, and it's not comfortable, and it's not meant to be comfortable. But there's no joy like in that. But by dying to ourselves and not focusing on our flesh, is when we can connect with the Spirit and with God even more. And so there are different things that you can accomplish while you pray and fast. And it's like, I just thought about this illustration, it's like if you have a car instead of walking. So if you're walking somewhere, it's going to take you a while, but if you have a car, you can get there quicker. And it's prayer accompanied by fasting can do that, can bring us quicker to the Lord and to understand Him and to have His mind on things that we're fasting about, or even just in general get closer to Him a lot quicker than if we don't fast, because then we are distracted by other things. And it's always been a cornerstone of Christian religion, and there are a lot of verses and loads of teachings on fasting in the Bible, in the Old and in the New Testament. And actually some of you probably know that fasting is one of the 4 pillars of the Islamic faith. And so they understand the value of it and the power of it. And that's why I think probably partially, that's why they're so zealous. Like it gives them that zeal because they fast. And I just think like if we as Christians realize how much power is that, how much zeal could we have, about our faith and about Jesus. And things that stop us from going deeper in our faith and becoming more like Jesus are usually doubt, unbelief, and lack of faith. And this is, the fasting actually helps to remove this, removes doubt, unbelief, and lack of faith. And I was thinking about the characters in the Bible that were most developed spiritually. And obviously Jesus, the Son of God, and Moses and Elijah, they all fasted for 40 days. And when you study their lives, you'll see that there was so much power in their lives. There were other characters in the Bible that had really interesting lives, but these lives were just a bit different, I would say. And I think fasting is to do with that as well. And then there were other people in the Bible who fasted. It doesn't say 40 days, but David fasted, Daniel, John the Baptist, and Paul. And when you study their lives, you see that they were like set apart for a purpose and for a mission. And there was so much power in what they did and the way they walked with God in the Spirit. So I just wanted to encourage you. There are loads of reasons to pray and to fast together because it can accomplish so much in you. So I just want to share with you some of the benefits of fasting that I put down here. So it removes pride because it's very humbling when you're fasting, because you're denying your flesh food, so you become quite humble. And it intensifies power of prayer. It amplifies the power of prayer. It's a great faith producer. That's in Matthew 17:21, if you want to look that out. It masters the old self and our old man and gives us a beating. It mortifies the flesh. It can break bad habits. Like my husband Richard, he could testify of that. When he just became Christian, he when he was younger, he used to be quite into different trouble, and he fell out of a 3-story window, like of a height of a 3-story, landed on his back, and he broke his back. And so the doctors actually say it was a miracle that he survived. But because of that, what happened, he had to be long-term on this medication, on painkillers, and he became quite addicted to these painkillers. And then when he became Christian, someone came to our house and they prayed for Richard, and he got healed from this back pain and his injury. Although it was years on, but he could still feel the pain there even after so many years. And they prayed, and the pain lifted, and it just went. But then he was still addicted to the painkillers. So he was very young Christian, but he just decided to go on this fast, and he fasted for about 3 days. And at the the time he didn't really feel anything happening, but then that fast actually broke the addiction. Like he stopped taking the painkillers like straight away after that, and so that's how powerful it was. And he didn't even understand it at the time, but it accomplished so much in a short time. So what would have taken probably, if you're coming off any medication, I would imagine it would take months maybe to come off it completely, but actually because he fasted, it just fast-tracked it and it became so fast. It burns out fleshly lusts. So like those verses that I read in Peter about the fleshly lusts. So if you're struggling with something, like we all can sometimes, the best way to get rid of that is by fasting, going on a fast. Then the Spirit of God can remove that lust from you. There are some natural benefits to fasting. So it starves different diseases and it purifies your blood, because your blood gets cleansed, because no toxins are entering your system, and your organs get like this bath of blood, and your brain, everything is like replenished, and also it develops patience. And through fasting we learn how to believe that God will do what he tells us he will, and we will begin doubting flesh. So usually it's the other way around. We trust the flesh, we trust the natural, we trust what we're familiar with, especially in the Western world, and we don't really trust the word of God for what it is, or we can doubt it, or we can question it, and we sometimes might think it's a bit far-fetched, but actually by fasting, when we tune into God and what he's saying to us, we start doubting the flesh rather than God, so it completely turns it around. So it's a really powerful weapon that is so underused, and it would be great to see if church could go back to using this powerful weapon in these last days, because it was quite neglected, and it's actually, it's very powerful. Even when you study some great events that happen in the history of the church or of the world, there have been some people fasting in the background, and even at the Reformation of Martin Luther, they were fasting. And there's other instances if you wanted to look them up. But yeah, it's very powerful. And just to wrap this up, I wanted to share with you this testimony from the Second World War, what happened when a nation went on a fast for a whole day. So I'm just going to read this out. So the year was 1940. The moment was one of the darkest in the history of English people. More than 300,000 British troops suddenly found themselves pinned down in northern France. Nazi forces were bearing down on them. The British didn't have enough ammunition or supplies. At any moment, Hitler's forces would launch a ferocious attack. The Brits faced imminent annihilation. Prime Minister Winston Churchill and his advisors thought at the best the Navy could rescue 20,000 to 30,000 before it was too late. Others feared even that might not be possible. And the stakes couldn't have been higher. If so many forces were wiped out, Hitler and the Nazis would invade the British Isles and win. So the King of England called for a national day of prayer. The Sunday, an estimate 70% of the British people showed up at churches all over the country. They begged for the Lord's mercy on their fathers and sons and for the national survivor. And the Lord heard those heartfelt prayers and responded with what became known as the miracle at Dunkirk. Hitler inexplicably delayed giving his generals the order to finish off the Brits. A great storm over Germany prevented Nazi planes from being able to take off. The British people quickly assembled some 900 fishing boats, yachts, travellers, and other private and government vessels, and began ferrying the troops off the French beaches and back to England a few at a time. By the grace of God, nearly 1/3 souls were saved as a result, as was the British nation. We need another Dunkirk.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.